Good evening and welcome to today's Tropics for August 21st, 2020. Please note I'm not a meteorologist and this video is just a collection of my thoughts and opinions about storms I'm talking about. And for any decision making, please consult National Hurricane Center or your local officials. So today I'm looking at Tropical Depression 14, which is currently in the northwestern Caribbean, and Tropical Storm Laura, which is currently nearing the northern Leeward Islands. So let's first take a look at Tropical Depression 14. So we finally had a well-organized center pop out of convection earlier this morning, and it seems to be the dominant center now. So it's not a mess of like basically where is the center and is it like coupled with the mid-level center. So it seems to be structurally a bit better than that was yesterday. So it might begin strengthening, especially with this convection here, because for a lot of today, while it was easy to see the low-level center, that was because there was pretty much absolutely no convection, and that was because of this convergence area between trade winds to the east and more southerly winds to the west as a result of the circulation. So that imparted subsidence onto here, and now that is gone, so there's some convection blossoming over the center. So it does seem that TD14 will be able to strengthen a little as it has convection over the center now. Amid mostly still favorable conditions. The waters are still warm, the shear is generally still low, and there's a lot of moisture in the area, so it's definitely not a really unfavorable area. Also to note, there's some convection to the northwest, and that is a result of some upper divergence around that jet streak as a result of that troughing to the north. Here's infrared imagery to give you a better idea of how deep the convection is. You can see it's getting pretty deep over the center, so that will help deepen it some. And at the same time, you can see that convergence band is really just rapidly decaying. You can see those very deep convective, cold convective tops pretty much becoming a lot warmer, even down to negative or up to negative 40 or so Celsius. So it's definitely a lot less healthy here, and that will help this area generate some more convection with less subsidence. So looking at the current recon mission in the storm, you can see it's definitely easier to pinpoint the center, and there's a vortex data message here. So it's definitely not like yesterday where there's a barely closed center. If that, it's a lot more well defined. It's got convection over it. It's not a big broad area. So it does seem that it's organizing today, and we might see that organization continue into tomorrow. Looking at this water vapor loop, it's pretty easy to see some of the things around TD14, which is right around here in the loop. And one thing is that big digging trough here, and that is causing some very strong southwesterly winds aloft, and that would and that's actually shearing a lot of thunderstorms here, but it's not supposed to stay in this area, so you're not going to have TD14 get sheared that badly as it's in this region. It does look like it might get sheared further up, but doesn't look like it'll get sheared pretty much immediately. It's pretty easy to see where there's upper divergence as a result of that jet streak, where it turns to a more anticyclonic area like here, and as a result you do get those more divergent areas aloft, and that's around here. So you might see TD14 try to tap into that, and that would help some of the convection and provide an outflow channel in the short term. So that might help with some organization along with the current conditions that are still relatively favorable for it. Looking at the GFS forecast, which is valid just around nowish, a bit in the past, you can see that it does have TD14 right here. Based on the recon pass earlier, though, it might not quite be right there, but it's more like a tick north. So that is a bit important to the circulation, because as it travels more to the north and to the west, it will get very near or possibly over the Yucatan Peninsula, and that might stop or even reverse some of the organization and keep it from strengthening very temporarily. So I'll have to see about that. But right now, the bridge at the lower levels here is pretty much eroded away, and you can see some of the trough digging down into the Gulf. So that is imparting some westerly flow onto the cyclone right now. However, it's not strong enough to actually reverse it yet, so it's still traveling a bit westward, but it's also moving to the north as it's towards the end of the ridge. And that will continue for a little bit, but it might bend a bit more to the northwest as it gets towards the Gulf Coast as the trough departs, and you'll have the ridge build back in because it is still summer, so you tend to have that happen without deep troughs coming into the Gulf again. So it does look like it'll bend a bit more, and at the same time, we're going to have a tropical storm Laura right here track is roughly somewhere into the Gulf, and depending on how strong that is, it might also interact with TD14 in the form of Fujiwara, where you might see TD14 travel a little slower uh, because the flow from the Fujiwara effect will be opposite to the actual flow from the environmental area. So we might see it slow down on approach to the Gulf Coast. So it's a definitely uncertain forecast because it also depends on an external tropical cyclone, which itself has an uncertain forecast. So it's definitely hard to tell some of the or pinpoint the details. But we do generally know the some of what's basically going to happen, but not exactly what. So actually going back and circling the area of vorticity, you can see that it's embedded in pretty light winds aloft, maybe a little bit of easterly shear, but not really any major shear or anything. And you can see that jet streak, an area of upper divergence here. So it's too far away for TD14 to quite tap into that, but as it travels a bit more north, and you can see it with a low here on the tip of the Yucatan Peninsula, it's definitely going to still have a pretty favorable upper air environment because it has some slight southeasterly winds, but that is in the direction that is tracking, so it's not going to be an unfavorable condition really, and it also has anticyclonic flow aloft, and that's generally favorable for a tropical cyclone. So it definitely looks like it'll have continued favorable upper air conditions for a little while, and that might allow it to strengthen a bit in the Gulf until it starts hitting some more southerly winds aloft. And that's not too bad, except it's also likely going to be traveling to the northwest. And if you have a northwesterly storm movement and you have southerly winds aloft, that means you have a more southwesterly shear that is going to hit the cyclone. That might disrupt some of the organization and keep it from strengthening a little more, but that kind of depends on how strong it is in the first place. But it does seem that it might get sheared towards the end, and on approach to the Gulf Coast, it may weaken some. So here is the official National Hurricane Center track and intensity forecasts. And you can see that basically it will travel in a similar direction until it makes landfall in the Gulf Coast. Don't don't look exactly at the center point. That's why there is a cone. So it could be anywhere really in the cone and possibly outside in some edge cases. And as a result, you might see, give or take 20, or 12, even 24 hours of arrival here. So definitely don't look exactly at the track, but this is generally where it's supposed to go. And you can see it bends a little bit more westward rather than northwestward. Not by much, but it shows that the ridge might build a bit back in early week as that trough lifts out, but not enough for it to turn like due west. At the same time, you're looking at hurricane watches and tropical storm warnings for the eastern Yucatan Peninsula here, and that is because of obviously the strong wind that is expected as TD14 heads into the area. So it definitely looks like it'll be intensifying into tropical storm soon. Next name would be Marco, and definitely that is what you want to watch here. High wind, pretty likely. Usual tropical storm, maybe a hurricane force winds, depending on how much it can strengthen, and heavy, possibly flooding rain as it passes by, as you tend to see with a lot of tropical systems. And definitely something to watch a bit longer term on the northwestern Gulf Coast of the United States here. It'll likely come in into the early weekend, but luckily, at this point, it looks like it'll start getting sheared before it arrives, and as a result, it will be weakening on approach. However, still, some heavy rain is possible, but luckily, it doesn't look like it'll be sticking around for a long time. Now let's take a look at Tropical Storm Laura, and it was named yesterday, or not yesterday, but this morning actually, as a result of a recon mission that did find some tropical storm force winds. So it is at 40 knots, though it doesn't look quite as strong with the current recon mission. We'll have to see what it looks like further east, but it definitely is not a very well organized tropical cyclone. In fact, it's probably barely that unless it finds another more well-organized uh, low-level center here. Right now, there is an elongated area of spin, basically, and what the recon is looking at here is some kind of wind shift around this area under this new burst of convection. So definitely not a super well organized circulation. If there is a low level center here, especially since you have the mid level center spinning around here, so that is very tilted cyclone and it's just not well organized. Given the new convection here, you might see the vortex try to get down to the center or get down to the surface around here. So you might have a more well organized cyclone, but it really isn't too well organized right now. And as a result of some dry air. Its fast speed is not doing any favors. It's also making it hard to close off. So right now it's not too well organized, and it's likely to deal with some of the terrain of the Greater Antilles, but it might grow stronger down the road. It's a little far down the road, but definitely still something to watch. Looking at that current recon mission, you can see there's some sort of wind shift, but it doesn't look like there's really anything closed here. And that, again, is as a result of that fast forward speed that makes it hard for a low-level center to close off. So right now, it doesn't really look like we have that quite yet. They're going up northeast, so they might investigate this area of convection. That might they might find some higher winds there, and possibly something else, but. Again, it's not too well organized at the moment, at least. Looking back at this water vapor loop, you can see that the tropical upper tropospheric or trough here, so or as you might hear, the tut, uh, basically is to the northeast of Laura now. So it isn't affecting the storm as much right now with the shear that's associated with it, and you can see that it has some healthy outflow to the north, not as much to the south because there is some more convection over South America, and that's imparting some southerly shear in the storm. But a bit further east, you do have a bit healthier convection, so it does seem that shear isn't as severe as a problem right now, but definitely it is getting sheared a little bit. One thing also to know is this ridge ahead, which is going to play a part in the storm in the future. And then you have a trough up ahead, but that gives way to another ridge pretty much overhead of the storm, partially as a result of the outflow and latent heating in the upper levels here. This should stay distanced from the storm and doesn't look like it'll too severely hit it in the near future as it travels near or over the or Greater Antilles. What causes significant uncertainty into the track and the intensity is whether or not it goes over these Greater Antilles Islands. And what that would do is would basically the mountains would shred up a lot of circulation, keep it a broad, probably open wave until it gets into the Gulf, and that would delay organization until it gets here. So it would end up with a weaker cyclone. However, given that the actual large, broad wave kind of area that we're seeing here is, again, pretty broad and large, that means there will be some areas of vorticity outside of the Greater Antilles. And one thing that's very important to watch for is if it tries to consolidate some sort of vorticity and low-level center a bit to the north of the Greater Antilles, because if it can do that, it'll take advantage of a reasonably favorable environment before it gets into the Gulf. And If that happens, then it will be able to take advantage of a favorable environment while it is organized, which would mean a strong storm, which is what the GFS model does here. Here is a Sunday evening, and you can see it's consolidating something just north of the of eastern Cuba here, and that allows it to organize as it passes into the Florida Straits, and that would mean that it is reasonably organized into the Gulf, and that would means it ends up making it relatively strong. At the same time, the upper level conditions look relatively favorable. In fact, let's go back and circle this area of vorticity here, and you can see it's embedded in an area of pretty light flow aloft. One important thing is in the area it's southwesterly or southeasterly or more east or southeasterly, and since the storm motion is also in that direction, it's going to be in a more favorable environment, and at the same time, it doesn't look like it'll be traveling quite as fast. So that means it might be able to try to stack up, but the GFS solution is just one solution, and definitely don't take it as gospel right now, especially with the very erratic modeling at this point. So one important thing to do right now is nowcast and see where in real time there is some sort of vorticity trying to get going, or dominant low level center. Here's that upper trough ahead of the storm, and you can see that it's pretty far ahead, so it doesn't look like it'll be a major impact at this point. And as it gets into the Gulf, further down the road, you can see, well, here's an earlier plot that I've looked at earlier, and while TD14 gets sheared here, Laura is in a much more favorable position. There is a bit of easterly wind aloft here, but it's definitely a very anticyclonic area, and this is pretty ideal for a cyclone. So if it is able to get organized like GFS says, it wouldn't be a surprise to see it strengthen quite a bit, and that would threaten areas on the northern Gulf Coast, it looks like, in the next 5 days or so. So here is the official National Hurricane Center forecast for Laura, and you can see from its cone, a lot of the points take it very close to the Greater Antilles, and they've stressed a lot of uncertainty because of the terrain. So they're basically taking middle point where it basically maintains strength, and where it strengthens a little and is able to become a hurricane in the Gulf. But again, this is very uncertain. If it basically shreds itself over the Greater Antilles, it probably will end up weaker as it has to reorganize, and that takes time. As you actually saw with favorable environment with TD14, and but if it goes more north, like some modeling like the GFS shows, then it'll be able to organize faster and probably be more intense than this as it gets up here. But either scenario is possible, and again, it's a lot of nowcasting that we'll have to do. In the short term, there are tropical storm watches and warnings issued for Puerto Rico, the northern Lesser Antilles / Leeward Islands, and north coast of Hispaniola, along with Turks and Caicos, and some of the southeastern islands of the Bahamas. So some of the higher winds, especially in some of the squalls in Laura, will produce possibly damaging winds. And with a lot of these, especially weaker systems, heavy and possibly flooding rain are possible. So definitely make sure that you are prepared for something like that to happen too. And if you're further west, especially on the northern Gulf Coast here in the cone, keep a wary eye on the storm, and monitor its trends, because you could see possible hurricane coming into the area depending on what it does before it ends up entering the Gulf. Otherwise, there isn't too much to talk about in the Atlantic today. If you have any questions, comments about my video, please let me know, and thanks for watching.